Mitchell had earned her reputation as one of the most respected federal judges in the Eastern District of Michigan, over 20 years on the bench. At 53 years old, she commanded respect in her courtroom with unwavering fairness and legal brilliance that even her occasional critics acknowledged. Today, however, was not a day for courtrooms and legal proceedings. Eleanor had traded her judicial robes for a comfortable pair of jeans and a simple sweater as she drove her modest Toyota sedan rather than her Mercedes toward rural Michigan to visit her sister, Patricia. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the two-lane highway as she entered the small town of Westbrook, a place she had passed through many times but rarely stopped in. She hummed along to a jazz classic, her thoughts already on the weekend ahead when flashing lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Eleanor checked her speedometer reflexively. Certain she had been maintaining a consistent speed well within the limit, she nevertheless signaled properly and pulled to the shoulder, lowering her window and placing both hands visibly on the steering wheel, just as her father had taught her decades ago. Two officers approached, one on each side of her vehicle, the hands conspicuously resting on their holstered weapons. The stance seemed unnecessarily aggressive for a routine traffic stop, but Eleanor maintained her composed demeanor. The officer at her window, whose nameplate identified him as Rollins, leaned down with an expression that contained not a hint of professional courtesy. His eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance, something shifting in his demeanor that Eleanor recognized immediately from countless encounters throughout her life. Officer Rollins spoke with exaggerated slowness, as if addressing someone who might not understand English well. "License and registration." Now. The abrupt command lacked even the pretense of respect. Eleanor responded calmly. "Good afternoon, officer. May I ask why I was pulled over?" The second officer, whose nameplate read Bennett, scoffed audibly. Roland's face hardened. "You were doing 40 in a 35. License and registration? Or are we going to have a problem?" Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had been driving precisely at the speed limit, but she recognized the situation unfolding before her. She had witnessed it countless times in her courtroom, had heard the testimony of dozens of black defendants whose routine traffic stops escalated into something far more sinister. "I don't believe I was speeding, officer, but I'm happy to provide my information. I would also like your badge numbers, please." This simple, legally appropriate request triggered an immediate reaction. Rollins leaned closer, his face contorting with poorly concealed contempt. "Listen here, sweetheart. You people are always causing trouble, driving through where you don't belong. How about you worry less about my badge and more about doing what you're told?" The phrase "you people" hung in the air between them, its meaning unmistakable. Eleanor had heard those exact words in depositions and testimonies, had seen them in transcripts and police reports. As a federal judge, she had presided over numerous civil rights cases where those two words featured prominently. She maintained her composure, decades of courtroom discipline serving her well. "I'll provide my license and registration, Officer Rollins, but I would still like your badge number, and your partner's as well." Officer Bennett moved around to join his partner, smirking as he approached. "We got ourselves a lawyer here, Jason. Watch out." Rollins chuckled, the sound entirely devoid of humor. "Nah, she probably just watches a lot of those cop shows, don't you, honey?" Eleanor reached slowly toward her purse on the passenger seat to retrieve her identification. In that instant, Bennett shouted, "She's reaching for something. Weapon." The situation exploded into chaos with shocking speed. Both officers drew their weapons, yanked open her door, and physically dragged Eleanor from her vehicle with excessive force. Her shoulder wrenched painfully as they spun her around and slammed her against the side of her car. Cold metal handcuffs bit into her wrists as Rollins secured them with unnecessary tightness. "Looks like we got resisting arrest and threatening an officer now," Bennett said, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction as he roughly searched through her purse. Finding her wallet, he flipped it open and whistled. "Pretty nice car for someone like you. Where'd you steal it from?" Eleanor felt a familiar surge of indignation but channeled it into careful observation. Throughout her career, she had developed the ability to mentally record details during high-stress situations, a skill that had served her well during complex trials. Now she cataloged every inappropriate comment, every violation of procedure, every excessive action. She made a deliberate decision not to reveal her position as a federal judge. This wasn't about using her authority to escape mistreatment, but about documenting how these officers behaved when they thought they were dealing with an ordinary black woman. A passing car slowed as it approached the scene, and Eleanor noticed a teenager in the passenger seat holding up a phone, clearly recording the incident. Officer Bennett noticed too, immediately abandoning his search of her belongings to march toward the vehicle, shouting for them to move along. The car accelerated quickly away, but Eleanor took note of the license plate number, mentally filing it away as potential evidence. Rollins roughly guided her toward the patrol car, continuing to make racially charged comments under his breath. "Nice car, designer purse, always amazes me how you can afford these things. Must be a real good job, huh?" The implication was clear, a suggestion that any black person with nice possessions must have obtained them illegally. Eleanor remained silent, observing and remembering, all while the handcuffs dug painfully into her wrists, and the reality of what was happening settled over her like a heavy cloak. She was being arrested not for any actual crime, but for the unforgivable offense of being black in a place where officers Rollins and Bennett had decided she didn't belong. As they placed her in the back of the police cruiser, Eleanor looked out at her Toyota still parked on the roadside, thinking of the irony that she had chosen to drive the more modest of her vehicles today. Had she been in her Mercedes, she suspected their assumptions about theft would have been even more pronounced. The cruiser pulled away from the scene, carrying Eleanor toward the Westbrook police station, an encounter that would ultimately expose a depth of corruption she could never have anticipated. The story continues into the events at the police station, the revelation of systemic corruption, Patricia's documentation, Officer Daniel's whistleblowing, Crane's schemes, Eleanor's strategic trap, the federal takedown, and finally the transformation of Westbrook and Eleanor's promotion. All exactly as you provided, uninterrupted.